All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a closer look at the awe-inspiring centerpiece of the British Imperial State Crown. We're talking about a jewel absolutely shrouded in centuries of royal myth, bloodshed, and mystery. It is undeniably one of the most famous precious stones in human history. But, as we're about to see, almost everything you might have heard about it, well, it's totally up for debate.
What we have here is the magnificent Imperial State Crown, exactly as it sits today, heavily guarded in the Jewel House at the Tower of London. A variation of this very crown has adorned monarchs all the way from Queen Victoria to Queen Elizabeth II, but our focus is right there at the front. Sitting just above the massive Cullinan II diamond is this incredible glowing crimson orb. It's uncut, set in its rough form as an irregular octahedron with these soft, rounded edges, and it boasts this absolutely beautiful, bright pigeon blood red color.
To truly wrap your head around the sheer scale of this jewel, you've got to look at the numbers. It weighs a staggering 170 carats. It's about 4.3 centimeters, so roughly 1 3/4 inches long. To put that into perspective, this single glowing red stone is literally the size of a small chicken egg. Now, for centuries, it has been known across the globe as the Black Prince's ruby. I mean, it's a legendary name for a legendary stone, right? But what if the world's most famous ruby isn't actually a ruby at all?
Section 1. The Great Gemological Imposter, where science meets history.
So, visually, these two red gems are dead ringers for each other. They look completely identical, which is exactly why the world's greatest jewelers and royalty were so easily fooled for hundreds of years. But mineralogically, when you break down the chemistry, it's a whole different ballgame. You see, a true ruby is made of aluminum and oxygen, or Al2O3. A spinel, on the other hand, also packs in magnesium. Because these stones were often pulled from the exact same mineral deposits and shared that same deep crimson color, historical records just shrugged and lumped them all together under the catch-all term Bayless rubies.
It actually wasn't until 1783 that science finally caught up. That year, a French mineralogist named Jean-Baptiste Louis Rome de Lille figured it out and successfully identified spinel as a completely distinct mineral from ruby. And following his analysis, a bunch of the most famous, massive rubies sitting in crown jewels across Europe and Asia were suddenly outed as red spinels. Most of them were likely mined from the historic Badakhshan region right between present-day Tajikistan and Afghanistan. And yep, the Black Prince's ruby was one of them.
Before we jump into the history, there is a fascinating physical quirk right at the top of the stone. It's a small drill hole. Sometime back in the Middle Ages, this egg-sized spinel was pierced so it could be worn suspended from the neck as a pendant, which was a super common practice for Oriental gems back then. Today, that hole is cleverly plugged with a tiny little cabochon set in a gold slip mount. And the irony here? That tiny little plug is an actual, genuine ruby. You just can't make that up.
Moving on. The legendary origin story, a blood-red souvenir of conquest.
If you go by the accepted historical mythos, the timeline plays out like a Hollywood blockbuster. It kicks off in Spain in 1366, when Pedro the Cruel, king of Castile, slaughters the Moorish king of Granada and seizes his treasure, including this very gem. Just a year later, facing a massive revolt, Pedro the Cruel begs for military aid from Edward of Woodstock, the famed English warrior we all know as the Black Prince. In exchange for helping Peter win the Battle of Nájera, the Black Prince is gifted the stone in 1367. From there, it supposedly passes down to England's most famous warrior kings, sitting front and center in the battle helmets of Henry V at Agincourt and later Richard III at Bosworth.
Now, the absolute most dramatic tale in this whole legend belongs to King Henry V. The story goes that during the Battle of Alençon in 1415, the king was wearing a gem-encrusted helmet featuring our famous spinel. Suddenly, the French Duke of Alençon strikes Henry's head with a massive battle-axe blow. It nearly kills him and actually breaks a piece off the crown. Miraculously, Henry survives, the battle is won, and boom, this births the legend of the stone as a magical, protective talisman powerful enough to shield a sovereign from death.
Uncovering the historical truth. The evidence just isn't there.
So why do we even associate this specific stone with the Black Prince in the first place? Well, it largely traces back to the 1760s and a writer named Horace Walpole. Walpole claimed he'd seen a painting of a man in black armor wearing a white feather and a large ruby right on his hat. He confidently stated that this gem was exactly the shape of the rough ruby in the royal crown, and that the painting was undoubtedly a contemporary portrait of the Black Prince. Case closed, right?
Well, here's the plot twist.
Modern historians have completely debunked Walpole's theory. Even writers shortly after Walpole pointed out that the armor didn't match the 14th century, the heraldry was all wrong, and the gemstone in the painting didn't actually look anything like our irregular spinel. Because that lost painting was the main basis for the entire connection, it turns out there are absolutely zero verifiable primary sources linking the Black Prince to this specific stone. None.
And that brilliantly highlights a massive historical blind spot for us. If you look at royal inventories from the Tudors and the early Stuarts, they just vaguely list countless balas rubies. King Henry VIII had heaps of them. Queen Elizabeth I had an entire cloak covered in them. Without detailed drawings or specific carat weights, trying to trace this exact uniquely shaped pierced spinel prior to the 17th century is pure guesswork. We honestly just don't know for sure if it was ever really at Agincourt or Bosworth.
But don't worry, here's the good news. A true royal survivor, the real history is just as exciting.
This stone has a track record of miraculous endurance that is very real. It starts in 1649, when the English monarchy was completely overthrown and Oliver Cromwell ordered the crown jewels to be sold off or melted down. Yet, our stone survived, making its way back to King Charles II in 1660. In 1671, it narrowly escaped a brazen heist by the notorious Colonel Blood. In 1841, a police inspector literally had to use a crowbar to bend iron bars to rescue it from a catastrophic fire at the Tower of London. And in the 1940s, it survived the absolute devastation of the Nazi Blitz in World War II.
The crazy part is just how perilously close we came to losing this world treasure forever. Just think about this parliamentary sales list from 1649. During the abolition of the monarchy, this priceless artifact was listed as just 1 ruby balas, pierced and wrapped in a paper by itself. And it was sold off to a buyer for an amazingly low £4. Let that sink in. Thankfully, a royalist sympathizer most likely bought it up, keeping it safe under the radar until the monarchy was finally restored.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you with a really fascinating question. Does knowing that the stone is technically a fake ruby with a totally fabricated medieval origin story make it less valuable? Or does the fact that this single egg-sized spinel survived a Republican revolution, a daring heist, devastating fires, and global warfare make it truly priceless? It is such a testament to how human belief, sheer endurance, and maybe just a little bit of luck create the real value of history. Thanks so much for joining me as we unraveled the incredible story of the Black Prince's ruby.